welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and your other host this week is Sam. Welcome back, Sam.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for having me back. First time flying solo with you, so this will be interesting.
That's right, your very first solo episode. Jared was supposed to be on, but we're actually recording this on Thanksgiving week. So there were some plans that got in the way. Jared's going to try to be on next week along with Nick, but just a little inside baseball there for the Brokehead Core, because I know some people do enjoy that. But that'll be fun. We are recording this again on Thanksgiving week. I will be editing this on Thanksgiving Day because that is my dedication to the Brokehead Core and to this hobby. But if this is your very first episode, the way we format the show is we go through this week's news, and then we end it with the Brokehead Block, which is what Sam and I have been up to since you last heard us. So let's jump right in and explore sector number 537. So Sam, I don't know if you were a Nintendo Power reader, but there was a user by the name of Gumball who's uploaded PDF copies of all 285 issues of Nintendo Power onto archive.org. And these uploads include all of the ads, all of the covers, all archived and ready for reading, because otherwise the only way you could read these days was just to get a physical copy.
Yeah, and I believe those physical copies are pretty expensive now, so this is a pretty cool fan nostalgia thing that he did, because I did read Nintendo Power growing up. Nintendo Power, Game Informer, any type of like gaming magazine where I could get news a little bit early and see some of those, like heavily pixelated screenshots for a game that I was excited about. I was all over it. And yeah, I think just the price of like these older magazines, gaming guides too, have gotten really expensive. So it's cool that he did this so people can kind of look back on that time with some of that favorable nostalgia without having to pay, out the nose for it.
You brought up Game Informer. I remember there were a ton of magazines back then. EGM was a big one. That's one my buddy really enjoyed. But I was a Nintendo fanboy as a teenager and as a kid, so I was a Nintendo Power guy. And I actually had, I should track down the issue, but I have a Simpsons Hit and Run, I believe it was.
Shit,
a Simpsons Hit and Run artwork piece that I submitted to Nintendo and it got published. And I put it on this long envelope and it shows Homer driving over trash cans and it's got Moe's Bar, I think, in the background. And that actually got printed. I was surprised. I'm like, holy shit, my artwork made it in there. So that's my one claim to Nintendo Power.
No, that's awesome. You should have submitted that for like every art class you took throughout school. You're like, I already have this in the bag. Look at this. This got published.
That's an idea for if this new gig doesn't work out and I end up looking for something else, I'll put that in my resume.
Absolutely. Published in Nintendo Power magazine, and then some kid that's younger than you is going to read your resume and go like, what the fuck is that? Is that a fanzine? Is that a Twitter thread that I should be following?
What's an envelope? What do you mean you mailed paper? Why would you mail paper?
Even email, I think, is outdated now. So Jesus, I can only imagine like some kid being like, what do you mean you paid for a stamp?
Why didn't you just Instagram it to them and tag them?
Right. You couldn't just send that as a TikTok?
Well, I do have great memories of Nintendo Power. I did go on archive.org and I got to see, you just need a login. That's really all you need. And I don't know if they're accepting donations or not for the upload, but all you need is an account through archive.org. You can read all of that. It downloads. It's not like something that you can read on your browser or on your phone, kind of like a manga reader.
Yeah.
You have to download all those high-res files. So it's a massive thing if you do go in and read them, but you will own all 285 issues and you can export them at that point to your whatever tablet device you want to read them on or your desktop. And it's all on there and it's amazing. It's a great way to catch up on some old video games in a time when there was no internet or internet was very young. We had to rely on game FAQs or game facts, as I used to call it as a kid. And that was the way to get past a video game, something you got stuck in, if there were cheats on there, or Nintendo Power or magazines. That stuff was on there. You couldn't just flip on YouTube, go to the level you're stuck on, see someone's Let's Play, and be like, all right, well, that's how we got past it.
No, there was none of that. I remember it was like even when there was game stuff on the internet, it was like you said, we were going to like game FAQs, and some of them were wildly inaccurate too, because they were just all user submitted. You could put in like a random cheat code that didn't work on there. And yeah, this is awesome. Like this probably took this guy a decent chunk of time. So it's just a cool dedication to a hobby that a lot of people I'm sure are going to look back fondly on. So more power to him. I'm definitely going to check it out. And yeah, I'm sure it's like a lot of files, but you can only imagine the amount of time it took this guy to probably upload all of that stuff.
Last thing I'll say about Nintendo Power is if you do miss that magazine, there's a successor to it from some of the people that used to work on Nintendo Power up until those last days. It's called Nintendo Force. You can get it on their website, or you can go to Patreon. I'm a Patreon backer for them, and every time they release a magazine, they charge $5 and they mail it right to you. And it's in the same format of Nintendo Power. They've got every month they have a recap on this month 10 years ago, and they'll have the magazine that released, and they'll kind of show you a summary of what it was about. It's got the reviews, it's got the letters column, the artwork, exactly like Nintendo Power, except it's just got a different name, and they talk about today's games and releases. So once again, that's called Nintendo Force.
That's super cool. This has me missing magazines in general. Fan magazines, yeah.
Microsoft ended up pulling a pretty big move this week as they announced that the Game Pass Xbox Series S console will be discounted to $250 throughout the holiday season. So for that price, you get the console, a controller, and if you want Game Pass, new members are $1 for the first month. So for anyone unfamiliar with the difference between the Series S and the X, the Series S is a digital-only console, so it does not take any discs, but a lot of people that have Xbox have Game Pass anyway. So if you just subscribe to Game Pass, which I forget what the monthly amount is, it's not a lot. It's less than buying a game every single month these days. But you get a catalog of games, and you can just stream your games on your Xbox Series S. So for $250 plus Game Pass, you have a console that plays today's games. And they put pretty much anything that's first party day one onto Game Pass. Right now at Target, if you throw it, they are throwing in an extra $50 gift card as part of that sale that runs through a little bit of November. They're probably going to extend it to next month, but as of when we were recording this, they were throwing in a $50 gift card. But keep an eye out for those Black Friday sales, post Black Friday sales, anything holiday season. They will give you a little bit extra for this console. And that makes the Series S a cheaper console now than the Nintendo Switch. And on the flip side, Sony announced that it would actually be raising the price of their PlayStation 5 by about $50 in other countries. So just a heads up for international Brokehead Core members. But this seems like a really good deal if you're not too concerned about just playing on Game Pass.
I honestly might get in on this. I don't have a current gen console right now because I've always had PlayStation, but the PS5 is so... One, it's so scarce still, but two, it's like, it's just a hard price tag to justify as a guy in his 30s, man. Like, it's tough. You look at that thing and you're like, all right, I'm spending, hundreds of dollars up front, and then I'm going to spend hundreds of dollars in games, to get the games I want. And I can't lie, the convenience of Game Pass is very appealing. Like, it is essentially just a streaming service for games for pretty much the price of a basic streaming service. And yeah, it's all digital, which I know some of the old folks like myself are kind of like, I like the physical copies, but even me anymore, like, I don't know if it's, I haven't been through lockdown or what, but if I don't have to leave my house to play a game, that is kind of a boon now, especially with the frequency that digital copies of games go on sale. Now, it used to be that it was like, it's not any cheaper playing digital, so why would I do that? Because, if I buy the hard copy, then I have the copy with, the box and the artwork, and sometimes it would come with like extra stuff. Now that's less and less so, and digital stuff goes on sale all the time. And with Game Pass, you have a whole library of games at your disposal if you just pay that monthly fee, which is very nominal very nominal considering the amount of stuff you have access to. So if anyone's looking to get a current gen console and they haven't gotten one yet, this is probably the best deal we're going to get for a very long time.
If I were still gaming, I would be jumping on this console because Bobby has shown me Game Pass on his phone. You can stream games on your phone if you have Game Pass. And
on your phone, your PC, anywhere, pretty much. Yeah,
it's amazing. And he's showed me the whole Halo collection is on there, Gears of War, and I had never owned an Xbox console. I still haven't. But if I were to jump on this, I would have years of Xbox content that I missed out on that I could catch up on for who knows how long. I can play those games for probably years at this point and just continually stream them and then build up that back catalog of these additional titles that Microsoft is adding and making Game Pass more robust. Activision's deal is right around the corner, assuming the US stops meddling with it and gets out of it. And then we'll soon have, hopefully, some Activision Blizzard titles like Overwatch or Call of Duty on there.
Yeah, that's another cool thing. Regardless of how you feel about Xbox as a console, because the console wars they're still a thing, I guess, but it's like Microsoft is a heavily established software company. Like if you don't have a Mac, your computer has Microsoft software on it. So the advantage of that is like it's not even just limited to the console anymore. If you get Game Pass, like if you got a work from home job, I'm not advocating, slacking off on the job, but I'm just saying you can access those games from your PC too. That's all I'm saying. And I know plenty of people that, have like customer service work from home jobs for like tech companies or even banks now. A friend of mine works in finance, and it's like, as long as you're doing your stuff, you could just play games on Game Pass while you're on the clock. Not saying try that and see if you can get away with it, but I'm saying if you already know you can do that, it's a cool way to enjoy what Microsoft has to offer for very little money.
This guy, Sam, on this podcast I listened to, told me it'd be fine. He assured me that maybe I should try it. You know what? Send them to Sam. I'd want to hear how you defend like a Brokehead Core member, because I definitely would. I'd be like, look, did the work get done or not? That's the bottom line.
Absolutely advocate for that person. I'm very much like, as long as the work's getting done, why do you care what they're doing while they're on the clock? Like if that's what your job is, if you're not having to show up to like a storefront or a customer facing job, who gives a shit if you're playing Smash? I totally don't have a friend that does that for the entirety of his shift while he's taking calls.
When I used to work at the comic shop, there'd be two customers that I know worked from home that were like, "Oh, I'm actually supposed to be working now," and they're picking up comics. Like that shit would happen all the time.
Their subs. Oh yeah.
And I know
like they've got a phone in one hand, they're taking a call, they're typing out a message to somebody like, "Oh, look, I'm doing work right now." Also, if you read Detective Comics, it's insane.
And I know you and I are kind of dinosaurs when it comes to physical collecting. If I did have Game Pass, and I'm the kind of collector where, like comics with trade paperbacks, if I really enjoy the single issue run of a certain character or comic or whatever, like Department of Truth, I enjoyed the Paul Dini collection that he did on Detective and Gotham City Sirens. If I like the singles so much, I buy the trade paperback, I buy the collections because they're books that I want to reread. I would do the same with games. It's like, I really enjoyed that title on Game Pass. Just to collect the game for my personal library, I would buy the title, but that's just the way I am with collecting. And
I do like too. The exact same thing, honestly. Like, if I really like something that I do the same thing with manga too, because I have the Shonen Jump app, and I'll like read some chapters on Shonen Jump, and then if I really like it, even if I finish the whole series, I'll just go out and buy the physical copies, because that way I can have all the cover artwork and stuff like that. And like you said, I'm definitely a dinosaur, but it's cool. You can take advantage of multiple forms of media like that.
Did I ever tell you the story on why Scott is now a digital gamer and reader after years of being pretty much like me, gung-ho about physical media?
No.
I can't remember if he told it on the show here, but it's kind of a funny, bizarre story where his house got struck by lightning and it went through the roof and into their home, and it caused a small, not a fire, but it caused something to smoke up in the roof where some parts of the wood were really hot from the thunderbolt, and it could have been a fire hazard. They ended up calling the firefighters out because they did smell smoke. And they came out and they pretty much just looked at it and they're like, yeah, the wood just got a little hot and the lightning bolt went through and it could have started a fire, but it's all okay now. So that was his like
His
realization
oh
moment.
shit moment.
Yes, where he's like, I could have lost all of this in a fire. So that's now he's starting to sell off his physical media and now he's buying everything digitally. And that was his one thing. And I told him, Scott, the odds of that happening are so minute. Like it's such a freak accident. But it was enough to scare him to be like, look, I'm no longer a physical media collector. I now do digital, except for Pokemon or Kingdom of Hearts. Those things he still collects physically. But otherwise, he's trying to move all that stuff now.
Yeah, it is definitely advantageous as far as space too, because like I have way too much shit because I am a dinosaur and I just keep buying physical copies of stuff, and it's awesome to look at. But you hit that point where you're like, I'm literally looking at, like buying a bigger place or, finding like more space, getting rid of other stuff to justify this. So it is practical, but it's really cool, especially with comics and stuff. It's awesome to just be able to take the book out and look at the artwork without having to like load up your tablet or something.
Exactly right. And that's how I think you and I will continue to collect for a little while longer, but we'll see what goes on. But again, a lot of great deals this holiday season, especially in the world of gaming. So this one shocked the finance world. I was watching it this morning on, I don't even know what it's called, the stock channel. It's the one that I used to think was fucking boring, but now I'm like, oh, that's fucking fascinating. I get to see how companies are moving about and trying to make the shareholders happy. And this one, the Walt Disney Company announced last week that Bob Iger is returning to lead Disney as chief executive officer, effective immediately. And Susan Arnold, chairman of the Disney board, said, quote, "We thank Bob Chapek for his service to Disney over his long career, including navigating the company through the unprecedented challenges of the pandemic," end quote. So at the beginning of 2020, Bob Iger had retired and Bob Chapek had taken over. So as recently as last year, insiders did suggest that Iger, who was then the executive chairman of the company, and Bob Chapek did argue over the tone of content that was making it its way to Disney Plus. So apparently they both had this pretty hefty debate on the Deadpool films, Logan, and the Netflix Marvel shows, which Chapek wanted to put on Disney Plus and ultimately did. And people speculate that now with Iger back in charge, that it's going to turn into a more family-friendly handling of the company, which includes content that makes it onto Disney Plus, as opposed to what I expected was Deadpool, Logan, and all those to go to Hulu instead, since that seemed to be like their only adult service and not to have the R-rated stuff on Disney Plus. So it seems like there was a butting of heads there between the two bigwigs there at Disney.
Yeah, this is odd because it's like you said, I was expecting all of the more quote unquote adult oriented content to go to their other services. I like it, it's convenient, but it is strange loading up Disney Plus and it's like sometimes I'll want to watch, the animated movies from when I'm a kid. Like I'll rewatch Aladdin or The Lion King, but then it's also like, oh shit, there's Deadpool. And like, because, Disney had that Fox merger and you could just watch all of that on the same platform. And it does seem a little bit odd though, to kind of play devil's advocate, because like my sister just gives her kids, access to the Disney Plus account because originally there was no like non-family friendly stuff on there. And now it's a little more dicey. Like you have to monitor it a little more. So I can definitely get both sides of this. I'm sure some people are going to be annoyed because it's like, well, Disney bought up all these properties that were producing this, alternative content. So if they're going to buy it, they promised that they weren't going to mess with it. So I do think the best call is to just probably put this stuff on Hulu. But then people, can justifiably probably also be upset about like, if they don't already have Hulu, if they want to keep watching this stuff, now they're going to have to get it, which I do get that, but it's like you can get the version of Hulu with ads for relatively little money. What's interesting to me is, you would know better than I, but was there a kind of line in the sand for them bringing Iger back and getting rid of Chapek, or was it just kind of them saying like, Oh, Chapek wants to move on to other things.
I believe it's a summary. I think it's the stock. Honestly, the stock was at a year low and some of the lowest, I think, in the company's history since the pandemic. So you can buy a share of Disney. I think it was down to $110. And back in March, it was up to 160. So it had gone down about $50, which shareholders get very nervous about that kind of stuff. And so I think
For
that's
sure.
ultimately what it was, is they called for someone's head had to roll, and it was Chapek. It didn't help any that he was talking about animated films being for adult or for kids only and
For
not for
kids only.
adults. And there was some other weird stuff that he said that was like, look, man, you're the head of Disney. I might agree with you, but you're the head of Disney. You fucking sell the shit out of your product instead.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to be wrong, but I was going to say didn't in addition to that he makes some other like strange comments where people are like you might want to rein that in a little bit.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I know we covered it on here, but it was something right before that other bit about animation. And also the parks themselves had been they're not in great shape. I mean, they have all these weird decisions over the Genie Pass, which they're charging for, and people are buying them, so I don't really blame them. But if you go on Twitter or if you go on these Disney blogs, you will see a lot of them talk about how it's not the same Disney that it was pre-pandemic, where service is no longer, it's kind of taken a bit of a backseat. And I think that's what it is and throughout all industries, but it's especially noticeable at Disney when you see garbage cans overflowing, and that kind of stuff was unheard of 5 years ago.
Well, yeah, because that's what people associate Disney with is, like the utmost level of perfection and guest service. And Danny and I actually went, Danny's a coworker of Daniel and I's last year because Bobby gave us both tickets and I hadn't been in like probably close to 15 years. And I went and like it was great. I had a lot of fun, but it was also weird how, for lack of a better word, like hands off guest services was. Like they had the Genie Pass and everything, like you said. So we're essentially buying slots for individual rides, which was, a new experience for me. And then there was a case where we tried to go on Slinky Dog Dash and we bought the spot and then we got there and they said, oh, we don't have you registered for this. And it's like, but we bought it. Like the money came out of our accounts. We have the confirmation number here. And she's like, yeah, that confirmation number doesn't exist in our system. So then we had to go to the actual guest services desk. And that was like an hour. And to their credit, like this was right when things were starting to really reopen and everyone's coming out in mass. So I'm sure they had some hiccups with the scheduling and stuff. And it wasn't like, oh, it was terrible. It was just, it was very different from the Disney I grew up going to, where it's like you buy your day pass for whichever parks, or, back in the day, the big appeal was the park hopper pass. And then you just go on whatever, you wait in the line or you buy a fast pass. And that was pretty much it. Now there's so much more to it than that.
Immediately once Iger got put on here, there's one of the hosts on here works for the company. I won't say who, but they were saying how their fellow coworkers all were asking him, like, hey, did you hear about Bob Iger coming back? Isn't that great? So morale went up, as Bobby was pointing out in the Discord. So it seems like coworkers, people that work for Disney, are pretty happy about this. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe because they've worked under Bob Iger and they knew that times might have been better back then. But these changes aren't going to be overnight, and he only signed on for 2 more years. The biggest speculation here, and this was first reported by The Wrap, an unnamed insider predicted that Iger, who has agreed again to stay on for just 2 years, will conclude those 2 years by selling Disney off to Apple. So Disney is currently valued at approximately $180 billion. Do you see this as something that is feasible, something that would happen, or not even in the cards?
Man, that's tough. Like Apple's a massive company. I don't know if they're going to be willing to put up that much money, though. I mean, there's been like reports in the past about them being stingy about certain things. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Like, if you're asking, do I think they have the money? Yes. Do I think it makes sense for them? Not really. It's just a weird amalgamation of brands. But who's to say? I mean, if you had told me 20 years ago that Disney was going to buy Fox, that probably would have surprised me, with especially knowing the content that Fox was making at that point. But I don't see it happening, but I'm wrong about this stuff so often that it probably will happen. But if it does happen, I think there's going to be a lot of weird growing pains for one for Disney employees, but two for Disney fans also. Like we're not going to get the same content. Not that when I say we, I just I mean the brokettes that are. I'm not a huge Disney fan, but it's definitely going to be a shift if this happens. What do you think the probability of that going down is?
Disney and Apple have been very friendly for a couple of decades now. We saw the Wally's love interest is based on an Apple device. Is Eve, I think is her name. And I believe they had a hand in Toy Story at the very start. They co-owned some part of it or one of those productions. And then in several of the movies, they've shown Apple products from what I understand. And
that is true, yeah.
They've partnered up in the parks as well. So they have a great relationship. But whether or not Apple wants to get in that game is kind of what I'm more concerned about. Mainly the parks, because they don't run parks. They have physical locations at malls. They have Apple stores, but that's a very different beast than trying to run theme parks. So that could be a big risk for that company. Now, if they just want the media, if Apple's trying to get into, look, we're just buying Disney for media, and if we get the parks, fine. But they would be getting a ton of properties. They could then fold in Disney Plus and all of those streaming services like Hulu into Apple's streaming service. I forget what theirs is called, Apple TV, and be a robust section, a robust player in the streaming game, even bigger. They'd probably be number one, if not number two at that point. So if that's their whole goal is to just try to get properties to stream and to sell and to merch out, fine. But I just think it would be a little bizarre for them to run theme parks. And if I were them, and I'm nowhere near as smart as any of those people over there, but I would be like, all right, well, let's put some people in place that have ran these parks before and keep an eye on it, oversee it, and just collect money on it. Because really, we want Star Wars, we want the Fox properties, we want the Disney characters, we want Marvel,
right.
We want those on Apple products.
Yeah, I think if this were to happen, that would be the best move, is to kind of like buy Disney in on paper only and be like, look, you guys keep doing whatever with the parks, or they bring in like a third party facilitator. We just want all of the tech-based properties, all the online stuff and the distribution side of it. We're not interested in running a theme park because that's ground that Apple has nowhere near come close to covering. So I think, and like you said, we have friends that work for Disney. I think that would be really rough on the employees, at least initially. And I also just think it opens up like a weird can of worms for them. This is all, we're essentially just theory crafting here. This might not happen, but it would be interesting. That's to say the least.
I love this boomeranging of CEOs that's been happening since the pandemic. We got Bob Iger being brought back. Howard Schultz at Starbucks got brought back to Starbucks after all these unions started popping up. He's like, God damn it. It's like, just when I think I'm out, right? They pull you back in. And always the stock goes up, though. Like, shareholders love that. Give me the old guy. The old guy knew what he was doing.
Well, and I think that's the thought process, because like so many companies had such a hard time remaining profitable throughout COVID. Mm-hmm. The exception being the streaming services. So I think it's kind of like, okay, we're pretty much done with this as far as the lockdown aspect goes. So let's get the old money back in here. And I think for them, and rightfully so, the best thing that they can do is bring back whoever was in charge when we were most profitable, or at least that's still around from when we were most recently the most profitable. So I can definitely understand the mindset, but it is very funny. It reminds me of like the Expendables, where it's like, all right, bring the old guard back in. They know what they're doing. They might not be in their prime, but they'll get it done like these youngsters never knew how to.
What I've thought about too is that they're coming in at the right time. Like you were mentioning, we're kind of getting out of the COVID lockdowns, and we're still dealing with a lot of problems from that. But I believe that we're kind of on the uprise business-wise with a lot of these companies as they get back on track. So they're going to look even better as like, look, things are getting better, but it's like, yeah, because we're getting out of that lockdown period. If Bob Iger were there during COVID, things would probably not be great either. I think stock would have been at an all-time low as well, just like for a lot of companies. But again, it just looks really funny to a lot of investors. Like, see, they're back and now things are better. It's like, yeah, but also things are better.
Yeah, exactly. It's a chicken and the egg thing. Like, love him or hate him, Chapek got dealt a rough hand,
Yeah.
being in charge throughout COVID. It's like there was no way for them to make the amount of money they normally would. And it's like you said, I don't think Iger could have squeezed much more blood out of that stone either. Like you're just dealt a shit hand. I mean, I have friends that owned like restaurants and stuff that are just now like they're closing because they have never been able to recoup that money from COVID being closed. So it's like if Disney were a smaller company, they'd probably be looking at doing a serious Hail Mary right now because a lot of companies are just trying to recoup costs still.
One of the big companies trying to recoup a ton of cost, billions of dollars, is Warner Brothers Discovery. And its CEO, David Zaslav, another very touchy CEO right now. Not quite as bad as Chapek, but a lot of people like and dislike him. He recently touched on the linearity of DC films. He said, quote, I think over the next few years, you're going to see a lot of growth and opportunity around DC. There's not going to be 4 Batmans. And so part of our strategy is to drive the hell out of DC, which James and Peter are going to do. I think they've thrilled the fans. I think they're going to thrill you over a period of time, end quote. And this is a quote from The Hollywood Reporter as he had an interview with the RBC. So currently Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck will both be playing Batman in next year's The Flush film, the one that was initially going to get rid of the Snyderverse. And what do you think about his quote of there's not going to be 4 Batmans, as far as his thought process on what this means is for storytelling and what the multiverse that currently exists and what the future could be for that?
Yeah, I'm a huge Batfleck fan, so like I'm excited for him to get the opportunity to play Batman again. I don't know if that's the game plan going forward, but I don't know, man. This is a lot of news, and it's like they're in an odd spot right now. I think almost every DC fan, well, apparently not. We'll get to that, but a lot of people are not happy with the way DC is, whether it's, the Snyderverse fans or just the casual moviegoer. I mean, if you look at the numbers, Black Adam didn't exactly do gangbusters. The Rock's trying to spin it a different way, but that's a whole other thing.
He said they were babies. That was the recent thing. He's like, look, we're still babies at this.
We're still babies. Give us a chance. It's like you were just bragging. He signed that post as Black Adam. Oh my God. But yeah, so it's like, the Snyderverse fans are understandably not happy. And then I think even people that were fans of like the Batman and some of the other stuff are not particularly happy because it's so wishy-washy right now. Like, what is the long-term goal? I think people just want like a goalpost, like, okay, this is what we're doing. I would like it if Batfleck got his movie. I've been wanting that for years. I've kind of made my peace with the fact that I'm probably not going to get it. But I think they just need to kind of get boots on the ground here. I mean, it feels like their game plan has changed so much that it's almost like a weekly thing now. Mm-hmm. And I'm not blaming him for that by any means. Like, he's trying to do damage control. There's just so much stuff coming out. I think it's funny that he called The Flash the Flush, because it's like, at one point we were not going to get this movie, right? And now we are, and it might be the only thing we get with some of these characters, depending on how the movie plays out. It's going to be interesting. I'm waiting to see how many things get confirmed and how many things hit the chopping block and what those things are. Because, Black Adam coming out to me and some of these other projects not as surprising. And then I don't think it's Warner Brothers, I think it's The Rock, really try to spin Black Adam as this huge success, but it's like, bro, the numbers are there. I know what's going on. So we'll see how this shakes out. I don't want to be overly pessimistic about it, but there's a lot of stuff that's debatable whether or not it's going to be profitable.
If Pedo Gunn weren't already instated as the head of DC Films, I would be a lot more optimistic about this whole thing.
Right, that's what worries me too.
because I do think Ben Affleck, we know he got the role for Aquaman 2, and that was a change by Zaslav. He made changes to the Flash film. He made changes to the Blue Beetle film, which now is going to have Ben Affleck in it. Well, George Lopez said Batman, but we speculate hard that it's Ben Affleck because he is in Aquaman 2, he is in the Flash film, and the reshoots supposedly, from what we're hearing, is that Hamada wanted to get rid of the Snyderverse, and that's what the Flash movie did, is they went back into the Man of Steel timeline after Flash messes everything up. Of course, they go back into the Man of Steel timeline, and something changes in the universe to where Zod shoots down baby Superman's ship on Krypton, and so Clark dies, and that's how they get rid of Superman. Henry Cavill, they're out of that contract, or they don't have to re-sign him on, and they have Supergirl who makes it to Earth instead. So now they have a younger actor. She's going to be the new Superman of the universe, and she's cheaper, and that's going to be the play. And then Ben Affleck ends up dying trying to stop Barry Allen from fixing the universe. So it's Michael Keaton's Batman versus Ben Affleck's as far as ideologies. And when the movie is done, the whole timeline is merged, and Michael Keaton's timeline and Supergirl's timeline, all of those timelines are one. So Michael Keaton ends up being retroactively throughout history the Batman of this universe. So James Gordon, who's the actor that played him in Zack Snyder's Justice League? His name escapes me right now, but he was also
J.K. Simmons.
J.K. Simmons, thank you. He was always the Gordon to Michael Keaton's Batman, is how this all worked out. And that was the end of the film. And that's how they were getting rid of the Snyderverse while keeping certain parts that they wanted, like Commissioner Gordon. And the Batgirl film as well, Michael Keaton was going to show up there, but Zaslav said, fuck that. So that's why he canceled the Batgirl film, because that was you can't fix that movie. It's already like Michael Keaton is the Batman of the universe. We can't have
right.
That. And instead, the reshoots apparently preserve Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck's Batman, because those are going to be the ones moving forward. And originally, Michael Keaton was going to be showing up in Aquaman 2, in Blue Beetle, in future films as kind of like that Nick Fury role. But instead, Zaslav wants Ben Affleck to be that character, to be that Batman. So they literally just swapped the names. They're like, no, it's Ben Affleck's. And now he's going to be the one that shows up in these films, which is, again, great for Batfleck fans, but for me, I'm like, it's not the Snyderverse without Zack. You can't preserve the Snyderverse without Zack Snyder. It's just, for me, it doesn't work.
No, it's kind of great value Snyderverse, and that's no shade on Ben. Like, I love him as Batman, but it is not what a lot of people ask for. I get it. This is him making concessions, essentially, but it's like, at the end of the day, this is not entirely what anyone asked for. It's kind of like, oh, I'll give you a little bit and I'll give you a little bit. He's kind of piecemealing stuff out to try and appeal to everyone. But then it's like, well, the inverse of that is everyone's going to be halfway mad too, yep. Like, yeah. So I don't know. I'm a film fan and I'm a huge comic book fan. It's probably the hobby I cherish the most, but it's kind of like, this is kind of something that when you get into comic book media, you have to get used to, is there's rifts in the fandom. And for better or worse, you're probably, if you're writing, faithful adaptations at least, or, original stuff, people are going to have, disagreements about this stuff, and that's okay. I think they kind of just need to pick a side at this point.
Absolutely right. And so far, James Gunn and Peter Safran are the only ones that supposedly have this 10-year plan in place. They're the ones that are near finishing whatever they want to do over there. Whether or not it involves Zack is probably not the case, because Zack has said on the recent podcasts that he has not been approached by Warner Brothers Discovery to return. I'm pretty much just holding off until Clay Staub tells us what this pot roast is that he was promising in November with these hidden Restore the Snyderverse messages in the pictures. So if that ends up being nothing and December comes up, then I think I'm like, all right, we're not getting the Snyderverse. And all right, I've kind of started to make my peace with it, especially after Gunn got hired. But there was this question about Scott, who actually brought up the conflict of interest that occurs between James Gunn working for Marvel Studios and now being the head of DC Films, which he's been in that position since the beginning of this month. And he did respond to fans on Twitter who pointed out that conflict, since he started promoting Marvel Productions, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and Guardians of the Galaxy The Christmas Special on Twitter while contract contracted by Warner Brothers. He said, quote, "As was made clear in all press, until May, I am both DC and Marvel. I've dedicated the majority of the past 10 years of my life to the Guardians trilogy, and I'm not abandoning them or the thousands of people who worked on them at the 11th hour. The world won't end if you love both," end quote. So that kind of answers the question that I know Bobby had at the shop of, is he going to show up at the premiere of Guardians 3? And I think the answer is yes.
Yes, yeah. Man, I couldn't be less excited about that, to be honest. And it's like, I think you probably hate Gunn the most out of all of us, but
yeah.
I got a little sad inside the other night when I went to rewatch Scooby-Doo, and I was like, oh no, this is written by James Gunn. Do I turn this off? And it's just like, let's say, because we both know people where it's like, yeah, but me watching his stuff, he's getting that money anyway, and that's fine. That's up to you. But I just don't think he's like a particularly good, definitely not as good as his fans think he is, writer or director either. Like Scott was saying it the last time, the main film of his that people really latch onto is Guardians 1, and supposedly he may or may not have plagiarized a lot of that script. And Guardians 2 is considerably underwhelming by comparison. And then every other thing that he's made, at least recently, has kind of been a flop. So it's kind of, I get it, like his name sells, but also him being tied to both is strange. I can't help but feeling it's going to lead to something that we don't want to see. And it's also just kind of like he's unproven with those properties, like it's such an odd choice to name him head of DC Entertainment, but whatever, we don't have any control over it. But I know for you this is going to lead to a lot more boycotting, which I definitely can't blame you for. It's kind of like there's nothing for a lot of people to be excited about with this.
Yeah, they're chasing that Marvel money, so they hired the Marvel guy.
They sure
tried to
are.
hire the Marvel guy before with Feige as well. So good luck with them, but I don't think the Marvel fans are going to come out for them.
They're not at all, and it's that's a weird path to follow, but it's their money.
I'll cap off that story by highlighting these tweets. Someone asked Gunn, "What's your personal favorite project of yours?" And James Gunn replied with, "It's asking me like which of my kids I like best." And people immediately replied with, "We know you like kids, James."
We know you like kids. Yeah. It's that's another one. That's another issue too. It's like, not to keep going on this, but it's like he's so wishy-washy about everything. Like, we're not going to get anything high quality because I feel like he just treads the middle of the road on everything.
I'll take your word for it, man. Well, yeah. I was going to say, I'll take your word for it because I never saw The Suicide Squad. I never watched Guardian. I'm not going to watch Guardians Christmas. I don't know if that came out yet. And then I didn't see Peacemaker either. I don't know what else he's done since then. That Superman, evil Superman movie that he made, like Red Blood or whatever it was called. So
I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, that's he might have just written it, but it was one that he's talked about before too. And there was quotes on there of he's like, "Oh, I made this one like Zach. Zach's a friend of mine." Zach, it's like, no, he's not. Stop.
Zach went completely radio silent.
Well, let's talk about a project that is pretty exciting. This is something that we didn't think would happen, and I think last time we covered some of this sequel. But in a recent interview with The Wrap, Constantine 2 director Francis Lawrence said he hopes to make an R-rated sequel. He said, quote, "The idea is this time, at least for me, is to really go at it and make a real R-rated Constantine, which is, I think, what people always wanted originally. Not the PG-13 version that just happens to get an R," end quote. So what are your thoughts on him aiming at an R-rated sequel as opposed to aiming for a more safe PG-13?
I mean, you were right when you said this is something that we would be excited about, because I'm super fucking excited for this. I have so much love and nostalgia for the first Constantine. And for him to be like, oh, that was not, the hard R that I wanted, where you guys are going to get it this time around. I'm really interested to see what that looks like, because maybe it's the fact that I saw the first one at a pretty, young formative age. I think I was like 13 or 14 when I saw it, but I remember being like, holy shit, you can do this type of stuff with a comic book movie. Because, it had all the cool, like, angel and demonology lore, all the biblical stuff, but very, like, dark and inverted. And for him to say, like, that was a PG-13 movie that happened to get an R rating, I'm super interested to see what his ideas are to come back and revisit this with a more quote unquote R-rated focus. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of passion behind this because Keanu doesn't do stuff anymore that he doesn't have a lot of passion for. That's why all the John Wick movies, in my opinion, are so good. So I'm with both of them being so excited about this. I cannot wait for this to come out. I also, Scott was talking about how he likes the new Constantine actor who's Matt Ryan, right?
Mm.
And like, yeah, he's amazing too, but 4K, no less both. So I think this is one of those opportunities, not to quote James Gunn, but like you can like both of these things, man. There's nothing wrong with it. They're both very cool interpretations of the character. So what are your thoughts on this?
So when going back and looking at some of the production of the first Constantine, apparently they had to tone down the original script and they had to tone down the original cut of the film because it was deemed as an R-rated film by the time the first ratings went through. So they had to cut out some scenes, and apparently because of the imagery of all the religious symbols in there and that kind of, whenever you have that kind of stuff in there, the ratings is a little bit more sensitive to the kind of violence or action that you might have in there. So they were saying, the director was saying, it was an R-rated film that we had to keep toning down to a PG-13 through editing, and even earlier than that, the script writing, to make it a PG-13, because that's what made money, right? And for a lot of studios, that's still the gem. But in this case, if he's like, can we just keep doing what we initially did with the first one? It sounds like he wants to keep telling the same story, and the original story was, this is going to have a heavier tone. It's going to have blood. It's going to have violence. It'll probably have some F-bombs thrown in there. And honestly, the people that are going to go see the sequel, and you might disagree, I don't know, but are probably going to be people that first saw the first film who are now well into adulthood.
Oh, I definitely think that's going to be at least the primary audience of who's turning out for this. So was the first one PG-13 then?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking it was R, but it might have just been like, kind of skirting that line. I thought he was originally saying like, yeah, we barely got the R, but this is going to be a hard R. But either way, I'm super excited for that. I do think you're probably right. It's mostly going to be fans of the first film. Constantine comic book fans are interesting, to say the least, because he's had his own solo series, which I'm a big fan of the Hellblazer comics and stuff, but you would know better than me, but I don't think most of them sell super well. He only does really well in like Justice League Dark and stuff, which like that's not hitting the numbers of like the main JLA titles or anything, but that book sold pretty well if I remember. You can correct me if that's wrong, but like that book definitely has its fans and people like the character, but I do definitely think the core audience for this is going to be, one, fans of the original movie, and then two, probably just Keanu fans. But I do think this movie will probably do pretty well at the box office.
So you ended up being right. I just looked up Constantine from 2005, and it is rated R. And the reason why I thought it was PG-13 is because I went into theaters while in high school to go see it, and I don't remember having trouble going in and watching it. Maybe I wasn't age at that point.
Yeah, well, also, maybe you just didn't get carded. I remember there was a time, too, where they were, like, very lax about that stuff with quote-unquote religious movies. Like, they were letting anyone in to see The Passion of the Christ, man. If you went with your parents, they weren't warning your parents or anything, and it was wild times. But yeah, I thought I remembered it being R, but it is a very light R. Like, yeah. I'm sure he had to get rid of a lot of stuff because like there is some blood in that. I think the R rating is probably just more for the quote unquote, what do they usually call it? Like upsetting imagery or whatever, or like scary imagery.
Yeah, it
Which,
says rated R for violence and demonic images.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, because like it's not super violent. I remember there's like one scene where I think it's Gabriel rips her wings off, and I remember being like, "Oh, that's pretty gnarly" as a kid. But there's no like graphic battle scenes or anything. Like I don't think there's anyone getting like disemboweled or decapitated or anything. Which if you've read Hellblazer comics, that shit happens. I'm really excited to see what he does with this.
Yeah, more of a reason for it to definitely be rated R. I mean, I think it would be a misstep for Warner Brothers Discovery to say, no, but make the sequel PG-13. There's just no reason for it. And now that I
No,
think
and
of
like
it,
you said, the fans are older too.
yes, exactly. And Keanu fans are older. I mean, if they're going in like, hey, I like John Wick, I don't know what Constantine is, but I like the actor. They're also used to the violence anyway, so they're in for an R-rated movie.
Yeah, I mean, Keanu Reeves is an immortal vampire god at this point, but I do think most of his fan base is people our age. Like, it's fans that probably have seen Point Break, and if you don't know what that movie is, you're proving my point.
Well, I can't wait for more Constantine 2 news, and we will cover it right here on the show as we get it. But let's top off this week's news with a comment from Patreon backer Adrian C., who talked about the Kevin Conroy episode, said, quote, "Great show, Daniel. Still in disbelief about Kevin Conroy. I watched Batman the Animated Series as a kid, along with Superman, Justice League, and Justice League Unlimited. I had no idea he was gay until I read a tweet from Grace Randolph, of all people. Looked it up on Wikipedia, and it was true. Doesn't take away that he was a good Batman. And let Julian know that he is trippin'. I watched I, Frankenstein for the first time a few months. I enjoyed it. Even bought it on digital. It's a good new spin on the Frankenstein lore. Some of the scenes reminded me of what Zack Snyder wanted to do in Zack Snyder's Justice League, but Warner Brothers said no because it was too scary." End quote. Thank you, Adrian. I appreciate the comments on the episode for Kevin Conroy, and that's one thing that Julian and I, he had mentioned it too, that he didn't know, and Julian's a member of the gay community, he didn't know that Kevin was gay until recently, and that's something that I know I didn't learn until the last couple of years. And now that you kind of know Kevin's story and how he was blacklisted from certain TV networks after they found out that he was gay in the 70s and 80s, you would kind of guess as to why Kevin would be a little bit apprehensive about being overly open, I guess, or being open at all about his sexuality, since that did cost him quite a number of roles. So it's not a surprise to me that a lot of people were like, "Oh, Kevin's gay. Okay."
Yeah, I actually learned that when a customer brought it up at work, and you and I were both there, and then you were telling both of us about how he kind of like hid that part of himself when he would go on castings and stuff because he was not getting roles at first. So that was all new information to me, and I grew up watching the animated series also, and Justice League, and I've played all the Arkham games, and I considered myself to be a really big fan of his. So that was new information to me, which I guess just kind of tells you he kind of maybe to some degree always stayed in that mindset of not broadcasting it, which is sad in a way, because I'm trying not to get oddly emotional about it, but he was a huge part of my childhood, and it's kind of sad knowing that he had to shelter a part of himself away like that for so many years. But he definitely brought a lot of happiness to a lot of people, I think, which is, kind of ironic considering the type of character that Batman is. But that just goes to show you how incredible of a performance he gave, because he played this dark, gritty character to perfection for so long, but so many people have so many happy and fond memories associated with it. I was actually telling you, I just watched Justice League vs. Fatal 5 for the first time recently, and he voices Batman in that. And he is very much, the Batman we all know and love, but he's kind of the only actor I know that has played Batman that can kind of get away with cracking some jokes as the character, and it still feels natural.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And since you are such a big fan of the animated universe for DC, the movies, the games, since you weren't able to be on for the episode where we did a Remembering Kevin Conroy, I do want to ask you, what is your go-to or your favorite performance or project that Kevin worked on as Batman, whether it is a game or a movie or a show?
It would probably be either Batman the movie Sub-Zero. I think Mask of the Phantasm objectively is probably a better film, but I remember watching Sub-Zero at my grandma's house because she would put on Cartoon Network and cartoons for me whenever I stayed with her. And her and my grandpa both really liked the Batman animated series, oddly enough, because it was kind of my grandpa really loved the noir detective aspect of it, and then they watched Adam West Batman growing up, and it was kind of like the perfect melding of those two worlds. And I remember a Sub-Zero came on, and I was just enthralled with it. And then I looked over, and both my grandparents were also heavily fixated on the screen, which usually, much like most kids, they would put on cartoons with me and just kind of grin and bear it and not really pay attention to what's on the screen. But it was such an incredible performance that he brought to that it really captivated both two older adults. I really like all of the Mr. Freeze stuff that he's in, because I think he has such a good back and forth with the voice actor who plays Mr. Freeze, whose name escapes me.
I
But
think it was like Michael Ansara or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, but he makes it so believable when Freeze is in those scenes with him, to where, yeah, Batman's a hard ass, but like he's a good and kind person at the same time. It's kind of he's always towing that line of like, what is the mask, and is it Bruce Wayne or is it Batman? And is Batman actually a scary vigilante, or is it a guy putting on a front to scare criminals so that the same thing doesn't happen to other good people? And I thought Kevin always captured that in such a really incredible, nuanced way. And I think it really speaks to the fact that, like, you watch the animated series with Leo and you get just as much enjoyment out of it as he does, and you've seen all of it before. Like, it's not the surprise factor for you, it's the performance. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it's probably Batman Sub-Zero. I love the Arkham games too. I love pretty much everything that he's done. I did really enjoy all his later movie performances too. I think he's amazing in Justice League Doom, because I think that was the first one I watched like in my more adult years. And then I went back and watched some of the other stuff that he had done since then. But I can't think of a single Batman performance that he's done where I was like, it was okay. I felt like Kevin phoned it in or anything like that. Like, even the ones that I know people don't like as much, like Killing Joke, I think is pretty controversial for a lot of people. He's still amazing in it. Like, there has never been a performance he gave where I think anyone could say, yeah, Kevin really was not at his best at that point. I think he's just coming in for a paycheck. I think he just loved the character, and I think that love translated to all of the fans. So to say that, we lost like a great talent is an understatement. So it was a tough thing for me to process, man, but I wish I had gotten to meet him and just kind of thank him for all of that magic he brought to my childhood. And arguably his performance is the entire reason I grew up to love Batman and the whole Batman family as much as I did, into current day. So I hope wherever he is, he gets to know that, he changed a lot of people's outlook for the rest of their lives.
Very well put. And that's something that a lot of people who worked with him in the convention industry have said about him, that he was never like, oh, okay, here's another fan I got to take a picture with. He was always like, yeah, no, let's do it. It was usually the DC reps that are like, no, he can't answer that. No, he's not going to do that. And he'd be like, no, I'm fine with it. So they kept saying that he was always real kind, especially even during the last year where he was constantly real tired. He had to sit down a lot. He was clearly not well. They were saying that even then he was still very eager to. One of the guys on Word Balloon was saying, we were offered to send him a limousine to pick him up, and he was like, no, it's fine, I'll take the train. Like, he was all right with it. Like, it was just kind of amazing that a celebrity like that, it was in that manner, because a lot of them are like, no, I demand this, I demand that. If you want me to come to this convention, I deserve this. And he wasn't that kind of person. And you kind of get all these stories now after his passing and kind of truly realize that, it's okay to meet your hero because some of them are amazing.
That was another thing. He was 66, right, when he
Yeah,
passed?
66.
And he's played Batman for about 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone that's listening, it's like, he got his big break in his 30s. So, if you have something that you love and are passionate about it, there you can always do it. There's no point where it's like, oh, I'm too old to still be doing this. So, I think he inspired a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Damn right. If Batman can do it, Batman's telling you can do it too.
Exactly.
Thank you again, Adrian, for that comment on Patreon. If you too would like to join our Patreon and get the episodes early every week, head on over to patreon.com/thereasonsimBroke. But that does wrap up our news for this week. Let's head into the more personal side of the show, which is the Brokehead Block, what Sam and I have been up to, what we've been reading, watching, what's been making us broke. So Sam, let's start off with you. What have you been up to since you were last on?
So I've been making more and more trips to the comic book store. It's like I'm back in high school where just way too much of my paycheck is back into this. So I know some of these you have not read yet, so I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but I did pick up Batman vs. Robin. I picked up issue 1 and 2. I haven't read 2 yet, but there's some stuff in there that I think you'll like. I also picked up some of the new issues of Detective, the Ram V stuff. That's been super cool.
Mm-hmm.
The artwork in it is incredible.
Yes.
I am interested to see where it's going because it's like, it literally says, I think the title of the story is like Nocturne Macabre or something. It's very strange and ethereal, but it's really cool. Once again, not going to spoil anything for anyone, but if anyone is a fan of the supernatural detective stuff for Batman, this is going to be right up your alley. There's a lot of mysticism and stuff related with this, while also still feeling like a very grounded detective story. So if you hopped off Detective Comics for a while because you weren't the biggest fan of some of the later Tom King stuff, I think now might be your jumping back on point. Because this has the potential to be very, very interesting. Other than that, I did pick up some more issues of Samurai Sonia, and it sure is a book, man. It's not amazing, but it's not offensively bad or anything like that. Like, if somebody just kind of is interested in like Japanese folklore, this is a pretty like innocent way to get into it. Not innocent in the sense of like there's no violence in there. It's pretty gory. It hits all the right notes for people, I think. If you are a seasoned comic book veteran, I don't think this is a you must have. But if you like variant covers, the variant covers are very good. And it is a good gateway if people are interested in like yokai folklore, which are Japanese ghost and stuff. So it's not a bad pickup. I wouldn't go out and buy the $50 variants if I were you. Like, I don't see this book flying off the shelves. Every time I go to my local comic book store, they have the same issues there. I've had no trouble getting them. But if you just want something a little bit different, it's not a bad pickup. And then I'm almost caught up on Little Monsters. The first trade just came out, so good time also. I'm buying the single issues because I love having all the covers, and Dustin Nguyen is one of my top 5 all-time favorites. Once again, that's an easy recommend for people, especially if you're a horror fan. It is a slow burn, like Daniel and I have said in past episodes, but when it gets going, it really gets going, and the mystery is really interesting, and it's worth picking up if you're just a Dustin Nguyen fan and haven't read any indie horror titles. This might be the perfect one for you to wet your whistle on because it's really good, and his artwork is on full display in this.
And Dustin does have a special variant hardcover of the first volume, I believe, of Little Monsters. It might be a sender, but that is up on his Big Cartel shop. He was just promoting it on Instagram.
Check that out.
And definitely saying that for you, and also for longtime Broquette, John72 Tex, who is a Dustin Nguyen fan, who owns Dustin Nguyen original artwork. Like I think I own one or two pieces, but he owns several from Dustin, and he's a big fan. So if he doesn't know, he knows now. And I know Dustin is putting up artwork, I believe, for the holiday season. So he's going to have some sketches up on his Big Cartel shop in case anyone wants to try to get some original art by him. And maybe I'll try to reach out to him again to be on the show. Maybe early next year, because right now the holiday season's a little crazy for everyone. A lot of artists are just kind of, commissions are closed, everything's done for the year. So maybe I'll try to get him on next year, and if we do, then that'd be a good get, just to try to get him to talk about Little Monsters, or maybe he's got an upcoming book releasing.
Yeah, he seems to kind of always have a book coming out right now. He is super in demand, which I love for him. He's amazing. And from what you've said, he's a super nice guy. So, I'm one of the more junior members of the podcast, but I'm just saying, if he comes on, I call dibs. But and also in the realm of him selling his art, that stuff can be a little bit pricey for a lot of people. But if you can afford it, I do highly encourage you to buy art straight from the artist, not to get on a soapbox, but like, if you know anything about the comic book industry, those guys are not super wealthy. So definitely go buy what you can from him. It definitely helps them out. And especially if it's kind of like what we were talking about before with meeting your heroes. He has, from everything I've heard, always been described as a super nice guy. So if you pick up some stuff from him, you should feel good about it. You're supporting a good dude.
Once I get off of this, I'm going to take a picture of I've never shown you the Dustin Nguyen art that I do own. He put up a animated series style Dustin Nguyen Lil Batman on a blank cover, and he put it up on his Big Cartel shop, I want to say 2 years ago, and it was, I think, $200. I was like, yeah, fuck yeah.
That's incredibly affordable for an artist of that caliber. Yeah,
exactly right. Exactly, especially post pandemic. Like, damn, you're
yeah. That's when that stuff really started hopping off. Right, was pandemic, because like people had disposable incomes, and the artist, that was the only way for them to get their art out there.
Exactly. So I'll put that into the collector's corner. If you're not in our Discord, anyone else listening, please join it, because we do share a bunch of great pickups like CGC books, comics, Dustin Nguyen original artwork, and it's right there for everyone to look at. You don't have to be a Patreon member for that board. That one is open to everyone.
I want to hear about what you've been reading or watching.
Well, if you are going to your local comic shop, we did just have Dan DiDio on last week, or the last episode, so make sure to tune into that. But we talk about Ancient Enemies, which is available at your local comic shop now, and also Ronin Book 2. Those did release this past New Comic Book Day, so they are available. They're from Frank Miller Presents. Frank Miller does have a hand in each of these titles, and for more from that interview and for more from these books, check out that interview with Dan DiDio, because that so far is the show's, I think, the biggest name guest so far in the show's history. So to the point where I made a special section on our website, thereasonsimbroke.com, click on guests, and you will find links to some of the bigger industry names that we've had on the show over the last couple of years. And I might have forgotten one or two people. I got to really comb through the episodes and curate that list. But for now, there's 6 guests on there, including Dan DiDio. So I'm excited to pick that up. It is on my pull list, both Ancient Enemies and Ronin Book 2. So I'm going to pick those up in a couple of days when I go into my comic shop and check them out, and I'll share my thoughts on them here. So I'm looking forward to jump in on that. But I've just been prepping for the holiday seasons, especially, and I might be switching over to a new job depending on if everything goes smoothly. And I know Maceo had touched on that when he was last on, but it's basically another season of change for me as that progression does go, or even at the current job that we're at, where the holiday season is coming and a lot of customers are going to be coming in that we only see for this part of the year, whether they're buying gift cards or they're buying a present for their friend, whatever it may be. It's going to be an interesting time of year for retail, as it always is every year. It's another holiday season that I get to work retail at.
Yeah, so remember, everyone, if nothing else, for Daniel's sake, be kind to retail workers. They are they might be 1 second away from saying, just for that, you're banned. So you don't want that. You want to be able to continue to shop at your favorite places. Are you excited for Sin City 2, Daniel? as
Yes.
far as yeah.
Yeah, he's doing the Sin City 2. There's a one shot with Milo Manera doing the artwork for it, which is
Oh, that's
insane.
going to be amazing.
Absolutely insane. And it's a one shot. I think he said that he was trying to release that in February. And then there's another sequel to it, which is called Blood and Dust, Sin City Blood and Dust, which is a prequel to the Sin City universe on the formation of the origin of Basin City, which eventually becomes, with the title of the name, I guess, Sin City. And you see some previous ancestors to some characters that you may recognize in that universe that are going to be in that book. So, yeah, I'm excited for that, and especially after Dan was telling us that this is the first and so far only time that Frank Miller has felt okay with someone else drawing Sin City, because before that, he's obviously gotten a lot of offers. Let's get a Sin City this, Sin City that. And he's like, no, only if I tell the story, only if I do it. But this time, I believe it's Philip Tan that is going to be doing the artwork for Sin City, and Frank Miller's doing the layouts for the book. So it sounds like an amazing project, and one that isn't tied into big companies' fingers or editors. It's literally just Frank and Dan DiDio.
Now that we're out of the news section, I was going to ask you about that. How do you feel about kind of like the state of comics currently? Because I know there's, among creators, a lot of disillusion about Marvel and DC, just the way they both physically treat writers and artists, but also, the pay scaling and some of the issues. Like, do you think over the next few years we're going to see more and more writers and artists going over to indie, or do you think that the indie thing is kind of, for lack of a better term, a fad? Like it's a temporary thing? Because I mean, indies are doing very well right now. They're obviously not bringing in the same amount as the big two, but that's kind of like an unattainable goal. I feel like they've been where they are for so long, but especially any one company overtaking them. But, indies as a whole are, I think, probably doing better now than they ever have. There's a lot more interest in them. Do you think that's a permanent shift because people are so aware of kind of the strife of creators, or do you think this is a temporary stopgap, and eventually the big two are going to have to do a course correction, and you think everyone's going to go back over there?
I think people like you or I are very aware of the artists and the writers and how they are treated at the big two, how they are made now to sign certain things that say, look, if this character pops off, you don't own the character. You don't get to do what you want with the character. This is ours. If you're lucky, you'll get a residual percentage, and that's if they're being nice, and that's if they sign over. And you, as an up and coming artist, you're like, I want to work on Spider-Man, so sure, I'll sign this over. Cut to 5 years later, and you're like, shit, man, why did I create all these amazing characters that are now in toys? And like Ed Brubaker was talking about how he would get trick-or-treaters at his door and see people dressed up as the Winter Soldier, and he's like, damn, I didn't get a single penny of that. So
yeah, they're not getting any merchandising money.
They're not, and it's a shame. So I do think that people like you and I are very aware of that, and we do champion these creators to go where the money's at. And if that's Substack is a big one right now for a lot of people like Tom King, and I think Brian Michael Bendis might be on there too now. Substack, you can pretty much, it's like a Kickstarter, I guess, but for comics and for creations, where you have your own newsletter, you can update everyone on your book, and then they release physical copies, they release digital copies, however you want to do it, and then they sell those physical copies later on as far as second printing, sort of, to people like Dark Horse, people like Image, to where people like me who don't want to jump on a Substack or who want to collect something physically can get it at their local comic shop. And I think that's going to be the future for a lot of these creators that are leaving the big two, unless they're getting paid an obscene amount of money like Tom Taylor is to stay at DC, or Pat Gleason to stay at Marvel, where a lot of these creators are going to just do their own projects, not be stuck on Batman for 6 years, and make more money in the process. As soon as they are a name, they leave. And I think that's the right move, because they're going to bring their readers with them. You and I are forever going to buy a Dustin Wynn project because his name is on it.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that too, because say what you want about like certain writers' creative decisions, but both of these companies have been known to turn on their creative staff at like the drop of a dime too, because Tom King was DC's golden boy for a little while. I mean, Mr. Miracle had incredible critical acclaim and it sold very well, which is saying something because Mr. Miracle is a D or C list character. Yeah. So, that is a testament to Tom King's ability to write something. And as soon as they started getting some discourse about his Batman run, they ended his contract early, and he was shorted out of a lot of money for not being able to continue that run. And I went to my local comic shop last week, and he's got an indie book coming out through Image now. That's a non-superhero title. It's like a weird apocalyptic romance title. I thumbed through it and it actually seemed really cool. I picked it up for my roommate who's just getting into comics. So it's kind of like there's no winning for a lot of these guys because it's kind of like one bad or questionable move. It doesn't matter how much money you brought that company, like they'll dump you.
Especially now that they're owned by big companies like Disney or previously AT&T, now Warner Brothers Discovery. That romance book you're talking about, that's a Substack title that's now that got picked up by Image, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, like, he got a really cool artist to do it. The art looked great. It almost reminded me of like Betty and Veronica or like Archie and Jughead, but with a lot more grit to it. And I hope he has a lot of success with that book. A lot of people listening, unless we explicitly say, we just don't like X creator as a person, it's usually because they've done something bad that we know about. We're all kind of the mindset, like, even if we don't like an artist or writer's run on something, it doesn't mean we want them to fail. Like, we love comics, so like I said earlier, I'm not the biggest fan of Tom King's later Batman stuff, but I do want the guy to succeed, and I think he's a talented writer. He writes a hell of a lot better than I could. But especially with writers and artists that we like, we want these guys to make money because comics is not the most lucrative thing.
Exactly right, and I'm glad you brought up the writer-reader relationship because I will give credit to Tom King. His New Gods film got canceled. And he was very PR about it, where he was like, look, sometimes things work out and sometimes they don't. And the company wanted to go in a different direction. And so the project didn't get made. Whereas the director, Ava DuVernay, started blocking anyone that had Restore the Snyderverse in their account, even if they've never tweeted her,
man.
Which was hilarious. Yeah. Because we were like, holy shit, did the Snyder Cut have something to do with it? And apparently the old regime was like, okay, we can't have two dark sides and we just released the Snyder Cut, so we can't have that movie. And that's apparently what might have been the reason why that happened, even though there was no future with the Snyder Cut in their eyes.
Would Tom, do you know, would he have gotten any kind of residuals had that movie come out? Or was it just kind of like he's worked on those characters, so he was excited about it?
I'm sure he would have gotten residuals because he didn't sound happy that the movie didn't get made, and Ava was clearly pissed off about it. They got paid for, he said he got paid for the script, but obviously there would have been box office money involved and
for sure.
Video sales as well. So, but
did he pen the script?
Yeah, he did. He worked with Ava on the script for the New Gods.
Yeah, that's a tough break, man.
So, but again, that's like kind of the contrast where I'm like, all right, he could have easily said some shitty things about the movement, but he didn't. He kind of left it as is and told the truth, and that was that. Whereas someone like Mark Miller, who called BVS I believe it was Mark Miller, who called BVS the Vietnam of our generation. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Dude.
Like,
well, and it's also like, you can not like a thing and have like friendly, even discourse about it, but like, that's so over the top, man. You're just trying to trigger people.
Yeah, so that's one of those things where I'm like, well, now me as a comic reader, I'm like, damn, like now I'm going to hesitate the next time I see a Mark Miller book. Or Gail Simone after her meltdown on Twitter. It's like,
I was just going to bring that up, yeah. And that sucks for you because you were a Gail Simone fan too, as was I, but it's kind of like, that's tough. She literally othered people, which is a thing that, most of us don't tolerate in our society anymore. So especially it was an odd look because she's from what I've seen very into like woke culture and stuff.
Right.
So I don't get kind of the mindset of like using the enemy's tactics. That was very strange. But yeah, and the fact that, to give more credit to Tom King, the fact that he kind of went that route as like, oh yeah, it's a bummer, but didn't say anything shitty. That's kind of, not to sound pretentious, but usually the sign of like a quote unquote real artist is like it's just about the work for them. They don't need to sling mud or anything. They kind of want the product to speak for itself.
Next time you get the chance on Discord, send a little message to Scott because he owns an original piece of Tom King artwork that he drew on a cover for him that he got at MegaCon a couple of years ago, and it's pretty amazing. I
That's
can't wait
awesome.
for you to see it.
Oh, is it Kyrie?
Adult Kyrie specifically.
Adult Kyrie. Yeah.
Well, I am going to end it right there for the show. I do want you to tell your weeb story for the post theme song content here, but please thank you, Sam, for being on for this week's episode, and Jared again, aiming to be on next week. We'll see what happens, but Nick is for sure going to be on next week's episode. Sam, please let the Brocat Core member on the other side know where they can find you.
So I'm on Instagram, first and last name, so Samuel Boylston, no E, everyone puts an E in there. It's Boylston. You can hit me up on Facebook Messenger. Hit me up on Discord. If you're a Patreon, I would love to hear what you guys are reading or watching. And if you have original artwork, send it. And, if you are an artist that sells your stuff, by all means, let me know where I could purchase some of it. I love supporting, up and coming artists and stuff. So hit me up with any of that, any recs you have, any questions you guys have about anything we talk about, and I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Sam. And to you on the other side, if you would like to gift up some mugs, t-shirts, some places still require masks, we do have those available at thereasonsimbroke.com. Just click on the pull down menu, click on merch, and it'll take you straight to our TeePublic store. You can still place orders to get them before Christmas, so we're still in that period, but I think at about 2 weeks into December, they start charging you extra if you want like a rush shipping or something like that. Otherwise, you can wait till the new year and it'll arrive on time. But they're doing a lot of sales right now on TeePublic on our storefront, so you can get a lot of really cool t-shirts and designs for as low as $13, which is a pretty good deal during this time of the year. TeePublic has not gone up on their prices, and I don't hear of anything that they are going to. But check that out again at thereasonsimbroke.com. And as always, you can find the link to everywhere you can find us as well on the website. I've been Daniel, joined by Sam, and Brocat Core. All will be well.
All right, is it time for the weeb story?
It is time for the weeb story. I do want to open it by saying, since we recorded this on Thanksgiving week, I am thankful for the Brocat Core member on the other side, for the years of support and listenership, for the support on Patreon, for the support on just being a subscriber and tuning in, and however people found us, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be. But I'm also incredibly grateful for the weeb culture, which you and Scott and Millennial Mike are a part of. So I want to hear the most weeb thing that you did this year, which might be one of the weebiest things I've seen or heard of.
Yeah, for those in the Discord, we're currently kind of having a weeb off to see which of the hosts is the biggest one, and I am pulling ahead real quick.
Yes.
It went from Daniel going, "You're not really a weeb, you just like anime and manga," to going, "That is so weeby." So what happened was I went to a Japanese restaurant for my 30th birthday with my parents a few weeks back, and I have consumed so much anime and manga. To my credit, I also watch a lot of like Japanese historical stuff, but let's be honest, it's the anime and manga that did this to me. And we went in, we placed our orders. The lady was very polite. She said, "Thank you." And in response, I said, "Thank you" back, but I clapped my hands together like in the praying hands motion, and I bowed my head, which if anyone has seen an anime or anything, That is the thing they do in Japan. If the only thing that could have made it worse was had I said "Itadakimasu," which is thank you for this meal in Japanese, which the fact that I know that tells you so much. To make this even worse, I did it again on the way out. She said, "Thank you for coming." We got up to get out of the booth, and I did a full bow because I was standing up. So from the waist down, I bowed, and she laughed a little bit and bowed back. And I guarantee you, after that first bow, she went back into the kitchen and told everyone about it, because a lot of our listeners don't know what we look like. I am so white that I am like one shade away from being translucent. So there was no way I was mistaken for an actual Japanese person, nor were my parents. So this was clearly, I've consumed too much anime. I guarantee you she went back into that kitchen and said, "Look at the guy at that table. Fucking weeb. Fucking weeb." So that is by far the weebiest thing I think I've done in my entire life.
Tom Cruise from Last Samurai, move over. Andrew Garfield from Silence, you're done. Sam's in the lead, man. Sam's in the lead.
Yeah, I'm coming for the crown, baby.
Yeah.